That was the purpose of it. I don't think it really worked, now that I think of it.
This big, long AR-15 really got in the way whenever you tried to help someone, right?
Sometimes.
If you had a handgun, for example, it would have been physically more easy for you to try and treat someone. Fair?
If I could have legally carried a handgun, I would have carried a handgun instead of a pistol. I mean, instead of a rifle.
You grabbed some medical supplies from Dominic Black's house before you came downtown that night, correct?
I grabbed extra gauze, but that's about it.
You testified earlier that your AR-15 was loaded with 30 rounds of ammunition. Is that right?
Yes.
Where did that ammunition come from?
That was from our last trip up north, from May, the time we took it up north.
So when the gun was left at Dominic Black's house, it had that ammunition with it?
Yeah, the ammo was in a box, in a magazine, I don't really know.
When you were at Dominic Black's house on August 25th, you found that AR-15 downstairs in his basement, correct?
No.
Where did you find it at?
It was downstairs in the basement, but I was told by Dominic Black, hey, go downstairs, grab your rifle.
So you knew up until that point that rifle was being stored in a gun safe in the garage, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't have the code or any access to that gun safe, correct?
I did not.
It just happened that on this particular day, Dominic Black's stepfather had moved that gun into the house, correct?
Yes.
You didn't know that beforehand?
I didn't.
You didn't know that it had been taken out of the safe?
No.
And so you went downstairs and grabbed it?
After instructed to do so by Dominic, I did.
And it had that magazine?
After I was instructed to do so. After I was instructed to do so by Dominic, I did go downstairs and grab it.
And it had the magazine already inserted in the rifle?
It did.
And the magazine was already loaded with 30 rounds?
I believe so.
When did you chamber a round?
I don't know if I ever did.
Well, you had to have to fire the gun, right?
Yeah, I think it was already chambered when I got it. That's what I remember. I don't remember racking it at all that night.
Because the way this type of gun works is that you have to have a magazine with ammo in it. You have to insert the magazine into the gun, and then you have to rack it to load one of those rounds into the chamber, correct?
Yes.
And you were familiar with how to do all of that, correct?
Yes.
And it can't discharge a bullet unless a bullet is racked into the chamber, correct?
Correct.
And so your testimony here, as best you can recall, is that you never had to do the initial racking because the bullet was already in the chamber when you took possession of it that day. Is that fair to say?
I believe so. I believe that it was already racked.
And the ammunition that was in that was full metal jacket ammunition, correct?
.223 full metal jacket.
.223 being the caliber.
Yes.
And full metal jacket being the type of casing, correct?
Yes. Full metal jacket is the bullet type.
The bullet type. Okay, I apologize. And you're aware there are different types of bullets, like hollow point bullets, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And when you were in the process of purchasing this gun, well, let me back up for a second. You said that the 30 rounds of ammo were left over from previous. I assume you mean when you were up in Ladysmith?
Yes.
And you were practicing with the gun up there?
Yes.
And Dominic Black's family has some sort of firing range or shooting range up there, is that right?
They have a gravel pit where it's safe to shoot.
And you and Dominic would practice with your AR-15s shooting at targets in that gravel pit, correct?
Correct.
And you would shoot at targets as far as, what, 75 yards away?
No.
How close were the targets?
I think the furthest I ever got was maybe from me to the TV.
You didn't shoot at any targets farther away than that?
No.
Dominic Black testified that he shot at targets 75 yards away. Did you see him do that?
I didn't, but I don't know what Dominic Black saw or what Dominic Black was shooting at. I wasn't with him when he did that.
But you were aware of the fact that the AR-15 was capable of hitting targets much further away than you to the TV, correct?
I believe so.
Did you know the capabilities of your own weapon?
I knew that it could shoot, and I believe from a distance. I don't know how far. I'm not an expert on AR-15s.
Did you personally purchase that .223 full metal jacket ammunition?
I did not.
Who did?
Dominic did.
Did you ask him to purchase it?
I did not.
So you didn't know what type of ammo was in that gun. Is that right?
I knew they were .223 full metal jackets. The first time I shot it, I had to load it into the magazine.
So you knew the type of round, but you didn't know what those rounds were capable of doing. Is that fair to say?
Believe a bullet's a bullet.
As you sit here today, you know that there are different types of bullets, right?
Yes.
You know that hollow point bullets, for example, do different things to a animal or a human than full metal jacket bullets, correct?
Yeah. Full metal jacket is a defense round, like another type of defense round. I know people use full metal jacket for hunting, and hollow point is something that causes more damage.
Hollow point bullets are designed to hit the animal that they're being shot at, let's say a deer, for example, and explode inside that body, correct?
No, I don't think so.
When you say explode, are you saying expand or explode? Because there are such things as exploding bullets.
Sure. Let me rephrase. Mr. Rittenhouse, what is your understanding of what a hollow point bullet would do if it were shot at, say, a deer?
I don't think people use hollow point.
That wasn't my question, sir. What is your understanding of what that bullet would do? Let me rephrase it then, because you're aware that people use hollow point bullets in their pistols to defend themselves against other people, correct?
Yes.
Ryan Balch, for example, testified in this trial that he was carrying a pistol loaded with hollow point ammunition for self-defense. Do you remember that testimony?
I do.
So what is your understanding, if you have one, as to what hollow point ammunition would do to a human?
I believe it would do the same thing as any other bullet. Like I said, a bullet's a bullet. I just believe hollow points... I'm sorry, I don't know much about ammo. I'm trying to think of what I remember, but I just don't know much about ammo.
So you didn't know the difference between what a full metal jacket bullet would do versus a hollow point, right?
I believe a hollow point, I just don't know much about this. I believe a hollow point would cause more damage.
To the first target, but it wouldn't continue through to any other targets, right?
I don't know the answer
Whereas
to
a
that.
full metal jacket bullet is specifically designed to continue through its first target and keep flying, correct?
First of all, the hollow point is not guaranteed to stay in the first object struck, so what you said was not correct. Secondly,
There's no testimony on that, Your Honor.
no, but you've been testifying, and that's what Mr. We're going to take a break for lunch. Please don't talk about the case. Read, watch, or listen to any account of the trial. We'll see you. Let's hope at about 12:45.
I'm going to do those two 12:45.
Oh, I've got a couple of hearings at 12:45. Lengthy. Let's say 1 o'clock. I apologize for taking time away from you. Okay, thank you. We are back, and the appearances are as before, with the jury absent. And anything before we start?
There is, Judge.
What's up?
Hi. Judge, I'm at the lunch break. I had done some research, and at this point, the defense is going to be making a motion for a mistrial. However, that motion is going to be requested with prejudice. I'm aware that the court's aware that normally a defense motion for a mistrial does not preclude a retrial. I understand that. There are exceptions to that, however. And the case that I am drawing this from is Day versus State. It's 76 Wis 2nd 588. And what it says is, an exception to this rule exists where a defendant's motion is necessitated by prosecutorial impropriety designed to avoid an acquittal. Now, what has happened in this morning was 2 times. The state had commented on Mr. Rittenhouse's right to remain silent. The first time he was admonished by the court. The second time the court had the jury leave and re-admonished him on that. Prior to Mr. Rittenhouse testifying, this court addressed various things with not only Mr. Rittenhouse, but with the lawyers. You had cited various statutes, and then you had asked if anything would be coming up on, for example, I think 90608. One of the other things you addressed was 90404. And you had said that based on the information that had come out at the trial, nothing had changed as it relates to your ruling. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Binger stated, and we looked it up, previously, he said to Mr. Rittenhouse, previously indicated that you wish to have your AR-15 to protect someone's property. Clearly in violation not only of the prior ruling that you had made, but the ruling that very day, that very morning. It appears to be that there are 2 really elements the court must consider when making a determination on a mistrial for what amounts to prosecutorial overreaching. And the first one is the prosecutor's actions must be intentional in the sense of a culpable state of mind in the nature of awareness that his activity would be prejudicial to the defendant. I would argue to you that that's clearly aware of that. You had warned him, you had told him prior to Mr. Rittenhouse testifying that these things, certainly the 90404 was off limits. You had warned him about the infringement on his constitutional right to remain silent. He did it again. The second one, I think, requires some action by the court in terms of a finding. The second one says the prosecutor's actions was designed to allow another chance to convict. That is, to provoke a mistrial in order to get another kick at the cat because the first trial is going badly, or to prejudice the defendant's rights to successfully complete the criminal confrontation at the first trial. Now, the case that I had cited is a Kenosha case, State versus Coping.
Opening?
Yep. 100 Wis 2nd 700.
Copening?
Yes, sir. In that case, the court didn't make findings regarding the prosecutor's actions. So I don't know that it's my role to sit here and say who's winning. I don't think that's necessarily what I'm supposed to do. But I think the court has to make some findings as it relates to the bad faith on the part of the prosecution. And if the court makes a finding that the actions that I had talked about were done in bad faith, then I think both elements for mistrial with prejudice have been met. And I think under the circumstances, based on what I've put forth on the record, I would certainly ask the court to consider those. And I would ask the court grant the motion with prejudice. Thank you.
Thank you. State?
Your Honor, I would like an opportunity to more fully respond to this with a little bit of research. At first blush, though, and I reserve the right to present case law and additional cites to the court, but I do want to point out for the record that the defendant has presented interviews to at least one media source and at least one online source since his arrest. And there have been questions about that night. There have been questions about what he did, things like that. He has decided, probably on advice of counsel in those circumstances, not to give a statement in the media about what happened. But he is talking about his family life, he's talking about his friends, he's talking about the circumstances of the case, he's talking about how this has affected him and things like that. So my point in asking those questions was, you have agreed to talk to the media, you've agreed to talk about yourself, you've agreed to give interviews, but until now, this is the first time you're explaining your actions. And so I wasn't referring to his in-custody statements. In fact, I never asked either detective about what the defendant told them. He actually starts to tell them some things, and then he says he wants a lawyer, and they stop him. And they Mirandize him first, by the way. Then he starts to tell them some things, and he says, but I want to talk to my lawyer. And they're like, okay, we're done. So I'm not referring to that. I didn't ask any questions of the detectives about that. But since this, the defendant has spoken to the media. He has talked about his life, about circumstances related to this case. He just hasn't given his exact version of events that night. So his voluntary discussion to speak to the media has nothing to do with the Fifth Amendment. That is his own decision. And if he's going to pick and choose what he wants to talk about in those voluntary interviews with the media, then I think that's fair game. It doesn't implicate his Miranda rights. It doesn't implicate the Fifth Amendment. He's making his own voluntary choice.
Well, wait a minute. You don't think he could give an interview about his awards he won in high school, or his demerits that he got, or his and about his sports activities and his swimming and that, and declined to answer any questions about the incident in question, and that somehow a waiver of his right of silence?
I think he's doing more than that, Your Honor, in these interviews.
I don't know. I knew nothing about them. I never, I haven't seen all of. I haven't seen probably 1% of all the evidence, which is pretty typical, as you know. So I have no way of knowing it. You have some interviews that he gave to media or to whatever.
Yeah, there's an interview that we're looking at on our computer right now from the Washington Post, where he talks to them. I know there's one. I think it's either the New Yorker or the GQ magazine, where he speaks to the reporters also. And he doesn't go into specific details about what happened that night, but it's not like it's talking about school or swimming or things like that.
Well, no. Just don't leave it at he doesn't go into specific details. I mean, it's certainly there could be a waiver, but a very modest discussion about the activities of that night. And if you're suggesting that occurred, that could make a big difference. But even a small discussion on his part of the night in question might be a full waiver. I don't know, but I won't know until I see it. But why don't you make copies of it and?
Can we have a few minutes to
Well, we won't do it right now. I do agree with you that this is not something that I would want to do sitting here without giving you an opportunity to respond. Although I would be interested in your preliminary response to the excluded evidence that you touched on after having been told not to do it, or having been told that I was confirming my prior rulings.
I do want to just point out right now, we've got it on the screen. This is a Washington Post article, and there's a reference to an interview that he says, the defendant says, he did not regret having his gun because, quote, I would have died that night if I didn't, end quote. So that's a direct quote from the defendant to the media about that night.
What about that?
Your Honor, all I can say about that interview is there were prior counsel representing him.
I don't care about that.
Well, and I believe it was a telephone interview. I don't know anything about the circumstances of that. I'd have to read the article.
Well, that might make a difference. And what about the you're asking questions about excluded evidence?
Your Honor, we went over this earlier, and I don't want to repeat myself because I know you've heard me, but if I could just summarize. I did hear you talk about that evidence this morning before testimony. The defendant then took the stand. He admitted that he had said to the person in the yellow pants that he had pointed the gun at that person. I have seen that video. It was actually introduced by the defense. I think it was even in their opening statement. And there's this person who confronts the defendant and accuses him of this. Frankly, to be honest, Your Honor, when I watched the video the first time, I didn't hear the defendant's reaction. I thought it was someone making an accusation and then the defendant walking away as if trying to avoid a confrontation. I was surprised to hear the defendant admit in his testimony, on direct, by his attorney, that yes, I did tell that person that I had pointed the gun at them. He explained then that he was joking when he said that. The jury can evaluate that. It goes to his credibility. It goes to whether or not he's telling the truth. It goes to his decision making. That is, again, this is an incident that occurred that night, so it's not something that happened separate in time. It presumably happened a few minutes before. But like I said, I was taken aback by the defendant admitting that he had said to this person, yes, I pointed a gun at you. And I think it's fair to say that watching that video, that person, believes strongly that this happened. The defendant is telling him it happened. Now the defendant today is giving us a different version and saying, oh, I made it, I was joking, I was just kidding that guy or whatever. I'd like to probe that. I'd like to probe what he said to that person. I'd like to probe what his motivations were, etc. I'd like to probe whether, in fact, he really did do that. And I think that that changes the equation with regard to the CVS video that was the subject of the other act's motion. Because in my mind, it is very similar. And I know we've disagreed on that, and I'm not going to belabor the point, Your Honor, but that was where I was coming from, was there's been a change in the testimony of the defendant today that I think makes that evidence, it's admissible and much more relevant than it already was. And I thought it was already relevant. And the court is, I do want to be clear
So
also.
I'm just here on the sidelines, just
well, you...
Yeah, I had made a ruling that the evidence wasn't coming in, and you decided that it was.
If I could just respond to that briefly, Your Honor, I was about to say, I did not interpret your ruling as an absolute... We've had 3 state motions in the case. There was one in which we asked the court to introduce evidence that the defendant was at Pudgy's bar with Proud Boys, and you were clear, that is not coming in. There was...
Don't get into other subjects. Come on, what you're telling me, you're an experienced trial attorney, and you're telling me that when the judge says, I'm excluding this, you just take it upon yourself to put it in because you think that you've found a way around it? Come on.
If I may finish, Your Honor, I was about to say that your ruling on our 3 motions and other acts motions was there were some gradations there. That you were clear that some things were absolutely out, and then you left the door open on other things. So I saw that distinction, and I thought to myself, clearly I know this is out, but you left the door open on other things. So I didn't interpret your ruling as this is absolutely never coming in, and I have practiced before you, Your Honor. I have filed other acts motions before you. Your practice oftentimes is to reserve ruling on those until you see the evidence. And I think you even said something to that effect at our motion.
I undoubtedly did.
So I thought, this is my good faith explanation to you, and if you want to yell at me, you can. My good faith feeling this morning after watching that testimony was you had left the door open a little bit, now we had something new, and I was going to probe it.
I don't believe you. There better not be another incident. I'll take the motion under advisement. And you can respond. When you say that you were acting in good faith, I don't believe that, okay? Let's proceed. Everybody in good faith. All right. Would you come up, please, Mr. Rittenhouse?
I do have...
Yeah.
Your Honor,
Yeah.
I do have another item that I want to raise before the jury comes in and raise it with you. There was another acts motion with regard to the defendant being at Pudgy's Bar after a court appearance in January in which he poses for selfies wearing a shirt that says "free as fuck." I would like to ask the defendant if he posed for selfies after a court appearance with members of the public wearing that shirt. I do not intend to talk about who those people were, what groups they were affiliated with, or anything along those lines. But I believe that it is relevant when the defendant goes to a bar after a court appearance and poses for selfies wearing a shirt like that. I think it is relevant to some of the issues that have come up in this case. For example, his remorse or lack of remorse, his utter disregard for human life. Those are things that I think it comes into play because I think that behavior is not consistent with someone who has a regard for human life. The jury has already watched him break down on the stand with emotion. I'd like to probe how heartfelt and sincere these emotions are when you go to a bar and you pose for selfies with people, when you're out on bond in a first-degree intentional homicide trial wearing a "free as fuck" shirt. So, as I said, I want to use the photograph. I'm not going to talk about any of the people or who they were from. In fact, the photograph I'm going to use has actually got their faces blocked out, so we won't see any of the people in the crowd. We'll just see the defendant standing with a group of people for a selfie with that shirt on. That's as far as I want to go.
Handle this issue.
Nobody got an opportunity. First of all, you've made a ruling on it, and it was clear prior to him testifying. So part of this is, would we have raised it? Would we have brought it up if we would have known that it was going to be coming in? We have done there's been nothing to open this door, Judge. Nothing that has been said to open the door about what happened 4 months after this is relevant in any way to what happened that evening. That is part of what the court had ruled. You had said 4 months after. I don't see how that goes to any 90404 type of admissible evidence. So my argument is, A, you ruled on it previous to him testifying. You confirmed your ruling, which you had made previously, where Mr. Binger just said you had shut the door on it. So apparently he doesn't believe a door that is shut should stay shut. However, now he's asking that something be admitted that, to be fair, this should have been brought up sooner. This jury, I did the voir dire, I would have voir dired on an issue of whether or not they heard it, saw it, were aware of it, how they felt about it, whether it had an impact on their ability to be fair in the case. We never went there because of your prior ruling. So there's nothing that's opened this door, and I don't think it's relevant, something that happened 4 months later. He talks about indifference to human life. That's that night, not 4 months later. There's nothing that's relevant about that. You've already made your ruling. I ask that you stick with it.
I'm struggling with why it would be relevant to any of the issues in this case. If he were on trial for using exquisitely bad judgment, if he were on trial for behaving in a very offensive way, then I could see the purpose. But an incident that occurred 4 months after the incidents in question, I don't see how that jury can work with that in reaching any conclusions about the issues in this case.
First of all, Your Honor, we have introduced evidence that the defendant had a slogan on his TikTok page, "Bro, I'm just trying to be famous." This case has made him famous, and he's posing for selfies as a result. One of our theories of this case is that his behavior that night was intended to gain attention, to be famous, and he's reaped the benefits of that. Second of all, he is on trial, in my opinion, for exquisitely poor decision-making. Taking a gun that he's not legally entitled to have, coming down in violation of the curfew, running around the community with that gun, trying to be a police officer when he's not, confronting protesters that he knows are hostile, and all of those behaviors, I think, are exquisitely bad judgment. So The jury can make that decision. The jury can give what weight they want to this evidence. But it's moments after he has a court appearance here. He's out on bond in this case when he decides to do this behavior. And nobody made him do it. Nobody forced him to go to the bar. Nobody forced him to wear the shirt. Nobody forced him to pose for selfies. It's his own decision making.
When I made reference to exquisitely poor judgment, I was talking about at the incident when he was wearing the shirt. Because everybody in all of humanity, at one time or another, displays bad judgment. Sometimes exquisitely bad judgment. And we don't let it into people's trials on unrelated matters. So I wasn't referring to his having had good or bad judgment on the day in question. That's a legitimate inquiry, and you're being allowed to present a lot of evidence on that subject. And the jury is going to be instructed in some of the element of some of the crimes that are charged here is going to deal with the caliber of his judgment. But you're talking about an incident that occurred 4 months later. So I'm not seeing it, and I don't want to waste any more time with it. I don't think that I've ruled before it's not admissible, and I have heard nothing to change my mind about that.
It was sought to be admitted earlier for a different purpose, Your Honor.
I'm sorry.
It was sought to be admitted earlier for a different purpose than it is today. The court has ruled that it can't be admitted for the prior purpose, but I am seeking to introduce it for a different purpose today.
And that request is denied.
Thank you.
Okay? Are we ready to go? Good afternoon, folks, and I've sustained the objection to the last, so let's proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rittenhouse.
Good afternoon.
You testified earlier that there were times that evening when Mr. Rosenbaum had threatened you. Is that right?
Yes.
And you described him as wearing a red shirt with a blue bandana. Is that correct?
At certain times.
Yeah. When he threatened you, that's what he was wearing?
I believe the first time he threatened me, he was wearing a red shirt with the blue bandana. The second time, he had it wrapped around his face.
Had what wrapped around his face?
His T-shirt.
So he wasn't wearing a shirt the second time around.
Correct.
And you indicated at one point you thought he had a chain in his hand?
I believe so.
When he made the threat to you with the red shirt on and the blue bandana, did he have the chain in his hand?
I think one of the times he did.
Okay, and so which of the times was it?
I can't recall off the top of my head. I think it was the time when he was threatening to cut people's hearts out.
And I don't need to know the threat, I just need to know which time it was. Was it the first time or the second time?
Second time, the second time.
What was he wearing the second time?
He was masked. Well, the shirt wrapped around his face.
And he didn't have a shirt on his torso.
Correct.
Okay. And you could see when he didn't have a shirt on his torso that he didn't have any gun tucked in his waistband, correct?
I wasn't paying attention to that. I was behind Joanne Fiedler. I was somewhere over there.
So how far away were you from Mr. Rosenbaum when he made the second threat?
By 10, 15 feet. I'm not really certain.
But you were close enough to hear the words out of his mouth.
Yes.
And you took that as a threat to you personally?
I took the first one where he said, if I catch you alone, I'm going to kill you. I took that as a threat to me personally. The second time, I took that as a threat to the group.
Can we have that photo, Exhibit 138, up on the screen, please? Do you see Mr. Rosenbaum in this picture?
I do.
And he's in the middle of the picture wearing the red shirt with the blue bandana, carrying the plastic bag, correct?
Yes.
Is that the way he looked when he made the first threat to you?
When he said, if I catch you alone, yes.
And he was carrying that plastic bag with him when he made that threat too, correct?
Correct.
How close was he when he made that first threat to you?
Close. I couldn't give you an exact estimate, but he was close, less than 5 feet.
So closer than Madam Court Reporter is to you now?
I'd say about the same, if not a little bit closer.
And you were next to Mr. Balch when that was said?
Correct.
Was anyone else there besides you, Mr. Balch, and Mr. Rosenbaum?
I believe there were other demonstrators around.
And you've seen in this trial that there's been a lot of video footage of that night, correct?
Yes.
And you've seen in this trial that there's a lot of video footage of you that night, correct?
Yes.
You'd agree with me that there's no video of either one of these threats, correct?
I don't know if somebody filmed it that I'm aware of right now.
You're not aware of any, are you?
I'm not.
So Mr. Rosenbaum looked like that at the time of the first threat, but then looked different at the time of the second threat? Is that right?
Yes.
And did you say he was carrying the chain when he made the first threat or the second one?
The second.
Okay. And he was still carrying that plastic bag the second time?
Yes.
That plastic bag has a clear side to it that allows you to see inside of it, right?
Sorta. I didn't really look into the bag.
So you didn't know what was in the bag at all?
I didn't.
Did he swing the chain at you when he made the second threat?
He did not.
Did he physically touch you when he made the second threat?
No, he didn't.
In fact, that entire evening, he never once touched your body, did he?
He grabbed my gun when he attacked me.
And that's why I asked the question the way I did. He never touched your body that night, correct?
He didn't touch me physically.
Okay. And neither the first or the second time did he run at you or charge at you or anything like that, did he?
He didn't chase me.
He didn't even do anything physically aggressive to you, did he?
No.
He just said some words.
Yes.
And that chain that he had in his hand, he never did anything to physically threaten you with that chain, correct?
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
And other than the chain that you've described, at no point in the evening did you ever see Joseph Rosenbaum with any other type of weapon, correct?
Not that I saw.
Never saw him with a gun?
Correct.
Never saw him with a knife?
Correct.
Never saw him with a bat?
Correct.
Never saw him with a club?
Correct.
How far apart in time were these two threats that you say Mr. Rosenbaum made to you?
I want to say, I can't give you a definite time. I wasn't looking at my clock, but I'd say within the same hour.
And both of those threats occurred while you were on the 59th Street property?
The second threat happened at the corner, and the first threat happened towards Ruther Central High School.
Okay, could you use that laser pointer and point out on that map where the first threat occurred?
The first threat happened right here in front of the building.
So you're pointing at a location that is by the 59th Street car source on the south side of that property, along the building and Sheridan Road on the west side of the road. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And you said there was a second threat within an hour after that, correct?
Yes.
Where was that threat at?
It was somewhere over here, I remember, like on the other side of the property, towards Ruther Central.
More towards the northeast corner of that same property.
Correct.
But you were still on the car source property when that second threat was allegedly made, correct?
Yes.
Did you remember what Mr. Rosenbaum had said to you later on when he's confronting you at the 63rd Street car source?
I took a mental picture of his face. When he said those threats, I recognized that was him that said that when he started chasing me.
So when you are running away from him at the 63rd Street car source, you're thinking to yourself, this is the guy who had made a threat to me earlier. Is that fair to say?
I was thinking this is the guy that said if he catches me alone, he'll kill me as I'm running away from him.
The reason I asked Mr. Rittenhouse is, how did you know it was the same guy when he's changed the way he looks?
His appearance, the shorts, his height.
But in both of those instances that you've described, he's got something covering his face, either the blue bandana in one instance or the red shirt in a different instance, correct?
He was wearing the red shirt when he chased me around his head.
So you remember that from the second time that you say he threatened you?
Yes.
And you thought to yourself, this is the same guy?
Yes.
So when you eventually were getting to the point where you're going down to the 63rd Street car source, right before the shooting, you recognized him as you're following him down the street, didn't you?
I didn't follow Mr. Rosenbaum down the street.
He was in front of you. You know that now, right?
I know that now.
But you didn't see him ahead of you as you're walking down there that night?
No, it was dark out.
But you, at some point as you get close to the 63rd Street car source, start running towards that lot, right?
Towards the fire that in the Duramax.
And Mr. Rosenbaum is running ahead of you, isn't he?
I don't believe so.
But you decided you needed to run because of the fire in the Duramax?
Yes.
Why? What was so urgent?
It was a fire.
There's fires all over the place, so?
I was getting to the fire to put it out.
We'll get back to that in a second. You indicated that while you were at the 59th Street car source, you said you put out a fire at the church next door. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you hear Joanne Fiedler's testimony yesterday that when you guys went over there, somebody had put some sort of flammable liquid on the door? Did you hear that testimony?
I did. I believe that was referring to the Ruther Central High School.
Okay, so when she described it as happening at the church, you think that was, she was getting it confused?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So, whatever happened with this flammable liquid on the door. The point is, some other group, some other people put that out before you even got there.
Correct.
Why did you feel that you should go around off the 59th Street CarSource property and put out fires?
To make sure my community didn't get burnt down and help.
And when you say your community, you mean Kenosha?
Yes.
Again, you're from Antioch. You're not living in Kenosha at this time when this all happens, right?
My dad lives in Kenosha.
Lots of people live in Kenosha, but you didn't, right?
My residence was in Antioch.
Okay. But you felt like you wanted to do things to protect this community. Fair?
The community that I was part of, yes.
And you felt like it was appropriate for you to take matters into your own hands to put out fires, for example.
To put out fires by using a fire extinguisher, yes.
Even though they weren't on the 59th Street property, correct?
Correct.
And were there other things that you decided it would be appropriate for you to go out there and take care of off the 59th Street property that night?
I was walking around and asking people if they needed medical help.
So you felt that you wanted to go out and help people, help protect people, help people feel better, treat people, things like that, even off the 59th Street property.
Provide first aid.
Normally in our regular society, that's something that we call 911 for, right?
Normally, yes.
Where are we headed?
I think that the defendant's decisions to go off that property and involve himself in other matters are relevant, Your Honor.
Well, I'll let you pursue it, but
And that's exactly how these shootings happen. So,
well, that's what the trial is about.
which is why I
go
think it's
ahead.
relevant.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Normally, we would, if there's a fire, if there's somebody committing a crime, you call 911, right?
Normally, yes.
You didn't feel like you could do that night, correct?
I don't think that I saw from the nights prior that the fire department wasn't responding to put out fires.
Well, the nights before, there were businesses on fire along 22nd Avenue. There's the CarSource, large-scale property fires on the prior nights, correct?
Yes.
On the night of August 25th, we didn't have any fires like that. We just had a couple dumpsters, smaller things, right?
That I saw, yes.
I didn't hear you, sir.
That I saw, yes.
But regardless of how big the fire is, you felt that night that calling 911 was not an option, correct?
I didn't feel that if I called 911, anyone would show up.
Which is why you decided to take care of it yourself, correct?
To provide first aid and put out fires.
To do the things that normally we would expect the police or the fire department to do, correct?
To help people, yes.
Could you please move that microphone a little closer so we can make sure we hear everything you're saying? You can adjust it if you need to move it a little closer. Thank you.
Let me, permit me to interrupt for just a moment. How's the temperature? How many are comfortable the way things are? Okay, I won't even ask the other side. There. See you ice cubes? There's nothing to worry about. It must be blowing differently here. Go ahead, Mr.
You came to Kenosha that night armed with the AR-15 and no other ways to physically defend yourself, correct?
I had an AR-15, yes.
Other than that, you had no other weapons or devices that you could use to defend yourself that night, correct?
Yes.
There's an interview in which you say you're not carrying anything non-lethal. Do you recall that?
I do.
You indicated in response to one of your attorney's questions that there was no friction with the protesters that night. Did I understand you correctly?
By friction, you mean?
Well, I'm using your words, sir. I heard you say, in response to your attorney's question, that there was no friction with the protesters that night. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes.
And you're describing what you observed when you were at the 59th Street car source. Fair enough?
Yes.
So, based on your several hours at that location, it seemed to you as though the crowd of, however you want to describe them, they've been called rioters, protesters, demonstrators, and you, things were fine. No tension, no friction, no nothing. Fair to say?
For the most part, other than Mr. Rosenbaum,
He was the only one
that threatened, yes.
that you saw.
Yes.
Can we please play exhibit number 18 at the 1 hour and 22 second and 22 minute and 14 second mark? Can you please play from this point?
And militia are up there.
We need water. Yeah, we got a fire.
Where? Oh, dumpster fire?
Yeah, just a dumpster fire. Hey, it's just like the year, man.
Yeah, right? If 2020 was a blunt, it would be just a fucking stem.
It would just be stem and seed, man.
I could use a doobie right now.
Hey, cover me, I got this. All right, let's... Hey, guys. Morning. How's it going? You guys want to fuck around and find out?
Hey.
You want
Reel in.
That's what's up.
Reel in. Don't cause problems when there's none here. Yeah, that's true. Just stay on your property. Otherwise you're gonna cause. There's way too many of them there. I have to agree with her. I have to agree with her that they shouldn't be on the street. They're just protecting their property. One of the guys is an asshole.
I know, I thought they were yelling at them. I was like, why?
Well, we did because they lit it on fire.
One of the guys losing his patience. He should go inside.
Yeah, that's what we're about to send him.
Yeah, if you guys could switch him out. Just that somebody's a loose cannon. He's got a lot of rage. He says the wrong thing. This whole crowd burns you guys alive. Protect your property. They're respecting that. Just keep it there.
Hey, let's keep it moving, guys. We're not gambling. Fuck the police. Let's go.
Dude, he's just trying to protect his property.
Do you think that looks like friction?
A little bit.
And you witnessed that, didn't you?
I didn't witness what Mr. Collette did. I didn't see that.
But you saw the reaction from the crowd, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I wasn't really paying much attention to that.
Would you agree with me that it seems that the crowd was reacting to members of your group going out in the street and trying to interfere with what was going on off your property?
I don't think they were happy about it.
And in fact, Kriston Harris, who made this video, specifically told you to stay on your property and not go out on the street and try and put out fires or interfere with any of that stuff. Just protect your property. Isn't that what he told you?
I believe so. I was just going to grab the garbage can, the dumpster that belonged to the car source that was on the car source property.
This is before you headed south towards the 63rd Street car source, right?
Yes.
This is before you decided to go down there with a fire extinguisher, correct?
Yes.
This is before you shot Mr. Rosenbaum, Mr. Huber, Mr. Grosskreutz, and at the person that was jumping over you, correct?
Yes.
So you knew that this was a crowd that would not react very favorably to you going out there and trying to put out fires or interfere with any of that stuff. You knew that, didn't you?
I didn't.
Even after that incident, you still didn't have any idea that this is a crowd that's not going to take it very well.
It seems like they were more mad at the part of him screaming what he screamed after, not putting out the fire. That's what it seemed like to me.
And he screams to them, "Fuck around and find out," right?
That's what he screamed to them.
After they had just tried to light a dumpster on fire, right?
Yes.
So what did you interpret that to mean?
I don't know. I didn't witness in the time. I just grabbed the dumpster a minute after and tried to pull it onto the property.
Because it seems to me he's saying, you light stuff on fire and I'm going to use my gun.
Your Honor, that's a total
I'll withdraw the question.
It doesn't matter what it seems to you.
Your Honor,
Mayor.
I guess you need not ask the questions and then withdraw.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what it seems to you. You can ask your questions. That's fine. Go ahead.
It was shortly after that incident that we just watched where you were interviewed by Richie McGinnis, correct?
Yes.
And you said you've never heard of him, never dealt with him before this night?
I have not.
Okay. So why did you talk to him?
He seemed like a nice guy.
Did he introduce himself as from the media?
He didn't specifically said, "Hey, I'm from the media." He was like, "Hey, do you want to do an interview?"
And when you heard him ask you to do an interview, you didn't think that meant he's from the media?
No, it's not what I said. I said he didn't specifically say he was from the media.
Okay, but you assumed when he says, "I'm going to interview you," that he's from the media, right?
Yes.
And did he tell you he's from the Daily Caller?
He did not.
So you didn't know what media company he worked for?
Correct.
But you agreed to have him interview you on camera, correct?
Yes.
Can we please play exhibit number 16? That one up there?
Correct.
You doing out here? Obviously, you're armed and you're in front of this business. We saw burning last night. So what's up?
My job is there's somebody running around.
And what about these other folks? I see there's some other people who are armed as well. Gotcha. And then what about these guys up on the roof? Gotcha. Understood.
In that video, you indicate that you have your AR-15 to protect yourself, correct?
Yes.
and you indicate that you're going to run out there and treat anyone who needs medical help, correct?
Yes.
Were you going to bring the gun along when you did that?
Yes.
To defend yourself while you're treating someone?
If I needed to defend myself while treating somebody, yes.
If you didn't think there was friction with the crowd, and you're out there trying to help, why did you expect there'd be any danger?
From the previous nights when I saw people being assaulted.
Were they medics being assaulted?
I don't know who they were. I know one of them was just trying to put out a fire at his business.
So you saw someone put out who was trying to put out a fire who got assaulted?
Yes.
But if you're going to help people, why would you expect anyone would try and hurt you?
I don't know. Somebody did try to hurt me, and I was helping people.
Well, you're talking about later on.
Yes.
Okay, but at this moment in time, this is before the shootings.
Yes.
This is before you cross 60th, before you deal with Rosenbaum, Huber, Grosskreutz, all that, right?
Yes.
So at this moment in time, you don't think there's a hostile crowd, you're there to help people, and yet you're going to run out there with the AR-15. I don't understand why you felt that you were going to be in danger if you're out in what you think is a friendly crowd, helping them.
I didn't say I didn't think they were hostile. I didn't think they were hostile towards us.
Okay, so they're not hostile to you and you're going to go help them. Why do you need the gun when you go out there?
I need the gun because if I had to protect myself because somebody attacked me.
Why would you think anybody would do that?
I don't know.
But you clearly planned on it. You were prepared for it. You thought it was going to happen.
No, I didn't.
That's the whole reason you brought the gun, isn't it?
I brought the gun to protect myself.
Exactly. Because you thought, you personally, were going to be in danger. Right?
Not necessarily.
I don't understand. You said you're going to bring the gun to protect yourself. So you thought you were going to be in danger. Right?
I didn't think I would be put into a situation where I would have to defend myself.
You said that the people around you on that property and the people up on the roof were there to protect you. That's what you said in the video, right?
Yes.
You meant when you go out in the crowd, they're going to protect you, right?
Watch over me, yes.
Watch over and protect you, right?
Yes.
Again, because you expected that if you go out in that crowd to try and provide medical service, you thought you were going to get attacked?
They were to watch me. They were on the roof to watch me, and if somebody was to attack me in their view, they could say, "Hey, Kyle, watch out."
They've got AR-15s.
Yes.
We talked earlier about the fact that the AR-15, you can't use deadly force to protect the building, right?
Correct.
The AR-15 was to protect you, right? That's what you just said.
Not the AR-15. I said they could shout down to me and be like, "Hey, Kyle, watch out."
So they're just carrying around the AR-15s for no reason?
I don't know why they're carrying around the AR-15s.
Can we play exhibit? This is the end. At the end of this video is where you invite Mr. McGinnis to follow you and Ryan Balch, correct?
Yes.
And you invited him to do that because you want, I think you said when your attorney was asking you questions, that you wanted him to film you while you were out in the crowd doing your thing. Fair?
I said it was okay for him to film me.
Let's play exhibit 17, please.
So you got kind of like medics who are packing. Yeah, right?
Well, he's an EMT.
Gotcha.
just asked you, so you're a certified EMT, and you said yes, correct?
Yes.
That was a lie, correct?
I'm not an EMT.
You're not a certified EMT. You're not an EMT of any kind. You weren't on that night, correct?
Yes.
So you lied to him, correct?
I told him I was an EMT, but I wasn't.
And you knew you were being interviewed by someone in the media when you told that lie, didn't you?
Yes.
Please continue.
And do you work as an EMT normally? Well, thank you for your service. I appreciate your service.
Can we back up 10 seconds, please? And then just pause right there. We just heard a voice say something to you, Mr. Balch, about people throwing rocks or something along those lines. I don't really need to know exactly what they said, but did you hear that voice?
The police officer from the Bearcat, yes.
That's what I was going to ask. That's one of the law enforcement officers in that armored vehicle that you're walking past, correct?
Yes.
And this, what we're watching in this video happens a few minutes after those same Bearcats had come to the 59th Street property and handed you some bottles of water, correct?
Yes.
And they say to you something to the effect of, "We appreciate you guys." Do you remember that?
I do.
That's when you were on the 59th Street property and you were acting like you were guarding that property, correct?
Yes.
So how did it make you feel when the police are letting you pass the lines, they're warning you about people throwing rocks, they're handing out bottles of water, they're telling you that they appreciate you? How'd that make you feel?
I didn't really care. I was thankful for the water because I had OC stuff, gas in my eyes, but I didn't really notice or care.
It didn't make you feel like they approved of what you were doing?
No.
It didn't make you feel like you're emboldened now to go out there and act on their behalf?
No.
Let's play the video here, please. Pause. You yelled something friendly. I'm not sure how many times, but you yelled friendly out.
Yes.
This is, if I can use the pointer, you are crossing on the west side of Sheridan Road. You are crossing south across 60th Street here, heading across the police line, which had barricaded across 60th and Sheridan. Fair?
Yes.
You understood at this moment that you are now entering a crowd of whatever you want to call them, protesters, demonstrators, your attorneys called them rioters or looters or whatever. That's who you're going to now be part of. You're going to be in that crowd, right?
I was walking through, I announced myself as friendly and that I was there to help them.
Because you had to do that to warn these people that, hey, I'm on your side, right?
I told them that I was friendly.
Because if you didn't say that, you were worried they would see you as hostile, correct?
Can you re-ask your question?
Sure.
I'm trying to
Absolutely.
understand.
If you're going to go up to Dominic Black or Ryan Balch, you don't need to tell them you're friendly because they know that you're friends, right? We don't tell this to our friends.
Yeah.
We say friendly to people that aren't our friends, people that might be hostile to us, right?
Yeah, I said it to them because they were throwing rocks at me, and when I told them I was friendly, they stopped throwing rocks at us.
And to be accurate, they were throwing at the Bearcats, not at you.
Yeah.
One of them hit one of the armored vehicles and bounced off towards you and Mr. Balch, right?
Yeah.
It didn't do any damage to that armored vehicle, did it?
Not that I'm aware
I
of.
mean, can you imagine trying to harm an armored vehicle with a rock? That's pretty hard to do, right?
Yeah.
But they weren't, no one was throwing rocks at you, but you were kind of in the ricochet line of fire. It's fair to say?
Yeah.
So you wanted to let these people know that, hey, I might look like I'm on the other side, but I'm really friendly. Fair?
I wasn't on any side, but
I didn't say that. I said that you might appear to them. I mean, that was what you were worried about, right? When you said friendly? And I notice you looking over at your attorney a lot. Can you, I'm trying to ask you, when you are doing this,
He's looking directly at Mr. Binger, and I'm behind him. He accused Mr. Rittenhouse of looking at his attorney. Does he want him to look at the ceiling?
I'll continue, Your Honor. You, at this very moment, announced yourself as friendly because you were worried that the people on the other side of that street would see you as hostile. Fair?
I can't tell you how I think they would see me, but I just told them I was friendly.
And I want to make sure you understand my question, because I was asking you what you thought when you said this. You said you announced yourself as friendly because you thought to yourself at that very moment, I'm walking into a group that is hostile to me. Isn't that true?
It looked hostile. They were throwing rocks at the squad car, not the squad cars, the armored police cars.
And you felt it was necessary to tell them friendly, 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 so that they wouldn't do anything to you. Fair?
Yes.
Let's continue the video. There's a person that comes up to you carrying a skateboard. Do you see that?
I do.
And he's got some fire extinguishers slung over his shoulder?
Yes.
And he says something to you about something putting out fires, and you respond, they know, they know. Did I understand what you said correctly there? They know?
That's what I just heard, but I don't remember that interaction very well, other than helping the guy after with the shoulder.
And that's going to come up in a second here, but when you're talking to this individual about the fire extinguishers, do you remember anything about that conversation?
It's hard to recall, but I think it was about fires, that they were putting out fires.
Okay. And when you said they know, who's they?
I don't recall.
Do you have any idea what you were talking about?
I don't.
It seems to me, Mr. Rittenhouse, that this person is suggesting he's going to go put out some fires, and you're sort of assuring him that you don't need to, it's okay. Would that be a fair interpretation or no?
No.
Okay. But you don't remember what was going on?
I don't remember the conversation, what it was about, other than fires, and I don't recall it.
This is one of the guys in the group that you later got your fire extinguisher from, right?
No.
Okay. We'll get to that in a second. Let's continue. Brian, can you continue?
You good?
How you got rubber bullets?
Oh, no, I just got rubber bullets. It doesn't even move. It just stunk. It just fucking stunk.
Little pepper boy never hurt nobody.
It was literally just like,
It's a little spicy, that's all.
I was like, oh shit. It was really hot.
Yeah, a little salsa.
Could you please not? Does anybody need medical?
I think someone's got some medical weed, I'll tell you that.
Does anybody need medical?
You're walking around asking people in this crowd if they need medical. And you talked earlier about treating a couple, I don't know, somebody at the 59th Street car source, right?
Minor injuries.
Minor injuries. When you were walking around outside that property, when you're out in the street announcing what you're announcing, did anybody respond and say, yeah, I need help from you?
Yes.
When was that?
I don't recall an exact time, but somebody cut their finger open and I gave them some gauze and some bandage tape.
Was that before or after this? Do you remember?
Before.
Where physically did that happen?
I don't recall.
And was this a situation where you announced or yelled out that you could help, and then somebody said, "Yeah, I need some help"? Was that what went on in that situation?
Yes.
Okay. As you're walking along here, from this point until the end, until you shoot Rosenbaum and Huber and Grosskreutz, no one in this crowd ever says to you, "Yeah, I do need medical. Come over and help me." Correct?
Yes.
That's correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's continue. This is the individual who accuses you of pointing your gun at them, right?
Yes.
And he says that you did so when he was on a vehicle, right?
Yes.
And in fact, he had been at the 59th Street Car Source location, climbing on, sitting on, jumping on one of the vehicles in that lot, hadn't he?
Not that I'm aware of. I know I heard Joanne Fiedler testify to that, but I don't remember seeing him at that location.
But he accuses you of that here.
He does.
And you tell him, basically, "Yeah, I did point the gun at you," right?
I shrugged it off and said, "Yeah, I did," sarcastically, meaning I didn't, but I just didn't want a confrontation, so I was like, "I did," and walked away.
Why did you lie to him?
I didn't lie to him. I was using sarcasm.
The words you said, "Yeah, I did," those weren't true, were they?
Your Honor, this is ridiculous. We're now fighting over sarcasm? This is a murder trial.
This is sarcasm. He says it's a lie. He's entitled to examine on it. Go ahead.
When you told that individual, "Yeah, I did point a gun at you," that wasn't true, was it?
I didn't point a gun at him.
So why did you react to him that way in that particular moment?
I thought that would be the best way to avoid conflict. I just said, "Yeah, I did," sarcastically, like, I don't know what you're talking about.
What conflict were you trying to avoid?
Any conflict, if he would have got, like, he was accusing me of something I didn't do, so I thought the best thing the best thing to do would be to walk away instead of getting into some argument. So,
but you didn't just walk away. You said to him sarcastically, "Yeah, I did."
I said sarcastically, "I did," and walked away.
Because you were worried about a conflict. What conflict were you worried about?
A verbal argument.
This individual is clearly expressing to you that he's unhappy because he thought you pointed your gun at him, correct?
Yes.
And you can understand why someone would be upset when you point an AR-15 at them, correct?
Yes.
You knew that even before this, right?
Yes.
In fact, back at the 59th Street Car Source, that crowd that you've described as not having any friction, many in that crowd got upset because they thought people in your group were pointing their laser pointers at them. Do you remember that?
I saw it in the videos, but I don't know what other people were doing.
I'm not saying anybody actually was. I'm saying the crowd was upset, and you knew that. You heard them complaining, correct?
Watching the videos, yes.
And even at that time, that night, you heard the crowd upset because they thought members of your group were pointing their laser pointers at them. Do you remember that from that night?
Sorta, yes or no. I remember Ryan Balch saying something like telling the people to stop pointing their lasers at people or something. I don't really remember that.
Ryan Balch was telling the people in your group to stop doing that.
The people on the roof
who were part of your group, right?
That were there, yes.
So you know when we're talking about laser pointers, we're talking about the sight at the end of some guns that helps, almost like this, right? If somebody does this at me, that could be someone pointing a gun, correct?
It could be seen as that.
And that's what the crowd was complaining about, right?
Yeah.
So you knew from that crowd incident, and you certainly knew from this incident, that when people have guns pointed at them, it can really escalate the situation, correct?
Yeah, I don't think anybody had lasers on their guns. I think.
Yeah, but let's go back to your group at 59th Street, because you actually didn't know any of those people other than Dominic and Nick Smith, right?
Yes.
You had just met Ryan Balch for the first time 3 or 4 hours before this video, right?
Yeah.
You had just met Jason Lakowski for the first time, just actually only a few minutes before this, right? Because he didn't get in until 10:45.
Correct.
So at this point in the video, I don't know, this is probably about 11:30 or so at night?
I met him about 35 minutes prior to that.
And probably had only spent, 10, 15 minutes at all in the same location as Jason Lakowski before you walk south?
Yes.
So, again, Jason Lakowski was someone you'd never met before that night.
Correct.
And you barely spent any time with him that night, correct?
Correct.
And of course, the people up on the roof, other than Dominic Black and Nick Smith, you didn't know any of them before that night either, correct?
I knew Dominic Black and Nick Smith, but the people on...
I misspoke their
yeah,
names.
sorry.
Dominic Black and Nick Smith.
I knew those are the two people I knew on the roof.
Other than that, you didn't know anyone else before this night. Fair?
Correct.
Okay. Now, when this little interaction that we've just watched happens, you're still walking with Ryan Balch, aren't you?
I'm not. I thought I was at the time, but seeing hindsight view, I'm not.
When you decided to cross 60th with Ryan Balch, you two talked about the fact that if you get separated, to go back to the 59th Street car source, right?
I don't recall that conversation happening.
But you tried to do that, didn't you?
I did.
Because you felt like if I'm out here by myself, that's not good. I need to head back, right?
Yes.
And you also talked to Ryan Balch about the fact that when you get out into this crowd, keep your mouth shut. Don't antagonize them. Didn't Ryan talk to you about that?
No, we didn't talk about that.
So at this very moment, you're telling us you've lost track of Ryan Balch.
A little bit ahead, but around that time, yes.
Let's continue the video.
What, yesterday or today?
Pause. You have just walked off the screen, heading east across Sheridan Road to the Ultimate gas station, correct?
Yes.
And at that point in time, you don't know where Ryan Balch is, correct?
When I stop and look around, yes.
And instead of deciding to head back at this point, you go over to Ultimate Gas and you talk to some folks over there. Fair?
I walk over to the Ultimate gas station, I walk around, and I try to see if I can find Mr. Balch.
And you couldn't do that?
No.
So then you decided to approach the police line and cross back, correct?
Yes.
Because you decided your best course of action at that point would be to return to the same group that you'd been with, correct?
Yes.
Now, at that moment in time, the police had pushed everybody south of 60th, right?
Sorta. I don't really know if there were...
Did you say south to 60th?
I said south of 60th.
Oh, okay.
Let's go back a little bit. We watched that interview with Richie McGinnis where he first comes up to you and talks to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you're standing there at the 59th Street property, aren't you?
I am.
And he talks to you about what you're going to do, and you're going to run out and help people, things like that, right?
Yes.
At that point, the police had already passed with all the Bearcats and MRAPs and armored vehicles, right?
That's what it looks like, yes.
And they had established a line on 60th and Sheridan, correct?
Yes.
And they pushed all of the protesters, demonstrators, rioters, whatever you want to call them, all of them south of 60th, correct?
I don't know if I can honestly answer all of them. I don't know. I believe there are some people still north down Sheridan and in the put across the street.
So, were there, I mean, we saw a crowd earlier of lots of protesters out in the street. That group, the numbers had dwindled quite a bit.
Yes.
Okay. So after the police move everybody south of 60th, there's no more actual threat to the 59th Street car source, is there?
I don't know.
Well, at that moment in time, what imminent threats did you see to the 59th Street car source property?
I don't know.
Do you remember seeing any protesters out in the street in front of the 59th Street car source after the police pushed everybody south of 60th?
I believe there were some across the street, but not many. I can't recall completely.
And that was just 2 or 3 people, right?
I don't know how many people.
None of those people came across the street to the 59th Street car source, did they?
I don't know. If they did, I would have walked off by now.
So you didn't see them come across the street?
I did not.
Fair to say that after the police pushed everybody south of 60th, you never saw any people threatening that property, correct?
I didn't see anybody.
And your goal that night, you took it upon yourself to protect the 59th Street property, correct?
The owners asked.
Sure. But you were going to station yourself at that property to try and protect it from damage. Fair?
The car source locations, yes.
And once the police had pushed everybody south of that, there was no more danger.
At that car source location, yes.
Okay. So, why not go home at that point?
Because the police were still pushing people back, and then they were backing up, and I was still helping people provide medical first aid.
Okay, so the police had established the line at 60th with their Bearcats at that point, right?
Yes.
And there was no indication that they were going to reverse and back up and move back north again that you saw, correct?
No, they did it earlier in the night where they did the same thing.
Right, but this is at 11:30, 11:40 at night, and they've established that, the police have established that line, and as far as you can tell, it's going to stay there, right?
I don't know.
And you talked about trying to provide medical help, but there's no one around that needs medical help at the 59th Street car source at that point, is there?
Not that I noticed.
So you don't have any purpose there anymore, do you?
Other than...
So why not go home?
Because I was going to help people provide first aid and medical assistance.
But that wasn't the reason you were there that night. You were there that night to protect the 59th Street car source.
It was one of the reasons I was there. Part of my reasons of being there was to protect the car source properties and provide first aid and medical assistance.
So you went out in the crowd, like we see in this video, looking for anyone who needed your help.
If somebody if somebody said they need help, I would have helped them.
So why go with Ryan Balch?
Because you're safer and better in pairs when there's somebody else that's also with you.
So when you crossed 60th, you were worried about your safety?
A little bit.
Even though you think this is not a hostile crowd and you're there to help them, you were still worried about your safety. That's why you needed Balch to back you up, right?
I said I didn't think they were hostile towards me. I didn't say that they weren't a hostile crowd.
So let me rephrase my question. That's to take that into account. You didn't think this was a crowd that was hostile to you personally, and you thought you were going to help them, but yet you also felt you needed a backup, an armed former Army infantryman to protect you. Fair?
Yes.
And yet when he's gone and you can't find him, you don't immediately go back, right?
I look for him for a second, and then I think max I look for him for like 3 minutes, and then I try to go back.
And when you couldn't get back straight across the police lines, did you decide to try and go around the police lines. For example, the Ultimate gas station is here at 60th and Sheridan. Why didn't you walk down the street here and go over this way and around?
I don't know.
Why didn't you go west over this way and go around?
I don't know. I guess it was very close in time that I was heading back, that I was turned down by the police before I got the phone call from Dominic Black. So I guess I didn't have time to really think like which ways I can go around.
You knew the layout of downtown Kenosha, right? Because you said you drove that area the whole time, right?
A little bit.
So you go over to the Ultimate gas station and you spend some time talking with folks that are there who are similarly dressed as you. They've got similar clothing, similar weapon, things like that, right?
Similar weapons. I wouldn't say similarly dressed.
But you went over there because you felt that those were people doing something similar to what you were doing that night. Fair?
I thought that would be the safest spot for me to go.
Why did you think you'd be safe with those people?
Because I was alone, and they were, like I said, you're better in pairs, and I didn't want to be alone in that situation.
You didn't want to be alone out here with this crowd that we see on the screen right now.
I
right?
did not want to be alone with them.
You wanted to be with the group at Ultimate Gas that had AR-15s like you, right?
I wanted to be back at the car source where there weren't people around.
Right, and we've talked about that, but initially you go to Ultimate Gas
to look for Ryan, yes.
But you also talk to people who have AR-15s just like you, right?
I wouldn't say I talked to them. I asked, after the phone call, I asked the guy for a fire extinguisher and to come with me.
Let's play exhibit number 11 at the 54-minute and 30-second mark. This is the Corey Elijah live stream when he's in the Ultimate Gas lot. Mr. Rittenhouse, that's Ryan Balch standing there in the Ultimate Gas lot, correct?
Yes.
Let's play this video.
That's the fireworks thing went down there.
I don't know.
Pause. We just saw you run through this video, correct?
Yes.
I started this video at the 54-minute and 30-second mark. It is now paused at the 54-minute and 56-second mark. So for 26 seconds, Corey Elijah has Ryan Balch on screen, center of this video during that entire time, right?
Yes.
And you run right past where Corey Elijah is standing, right?
Yes.
And Ryan Balch is loitering there in the middle of the screen for at least 26 seconds, right?
That's what it looks like on the screen.
And your testimony is you were trying your best to find Ryan Balch at the Ultimate Gas station at this point because you needed him to protect you?
I was looking for Ryan Balch, but I didn't notice him as I was running away, running towards car source 3.
But for 26 seconds before you start running, he's standing right there, isn't he?
Yes, and when he's standing right there, before I run with the fire extinguisher, I'm I'm over here on the phone with Dominic Black.
How long was your phone call with Dominic Black?
About 30 seconds.
Okay, so before that, you'd been looking for Ryan Balch?
Before that, I tried to get back to the car source lot number 1.
And you'd also been looking for Ryan Balch?
Seeing if I could see him in the crowd of people.
Because you wanted a partner, a buddy, to protect you?
To protect each other, yes.
And in fact, when you borrowed that fire extinguisher, you asked someone in that group to come along with you, right?
Yes.
Because you wanted someone there to protect you when you go down and put out what you think are some fires, right?
Yes.
Because you know that you're running into a crowd that is not friendly to you, right?
No.
That's why you had to say the word friendly, 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 because you knew this was a crowd that would not see you as friendly, correct?
I screamed friendly, friendly, friendly because somebody screamed burn inside.
I'm talking about when you crossed 60th. You yelled it then.
At that time, yes, but...
And no one in the crowd is yelling burn inside or anything along those lines, are they?
Not at that time.
And you also wanted someone from that group to come along with you when you're going to go down and put out a fire, because you knew full well that anyone running around like you putting fires out is going to cause a reaction in the crowd, a hostile reaction, correct?
I didn't think it would cause a negative reaction. I wanted somebody to come with me because you're better in pairs, and I thought there were other people at that car source before I got there.
Well, Dominic, if you're telling us that Dominic Black called you to run 3 blocks down the road to put out a fire at the 63rd Street car source, then you must have known at that moment that there wasn't anyone else down there, right? Why would you need to go if somebody's already down there?
Mr. Black said to me on the phone, hey, they're setting fires at the other car source. I need you to get down there and put out the fires. It must not have, I don't think it, I took it as there's not other people down there.
Why would you need to go 3 blocks down if there were already people there?
He's asking you a question. This witness doesn't know the answer, whether there are people there or not.
He's told us he thought there were, so I'm probing the basis of that and his understanding at the time.
You can answer if you understand the question.
I'll repeat the question. Why would you need to run 3 blocks down to the 63rd car source if you thought there were already people there?
I thought there were people there, but Dominic asked me to go down there. I thought that was to help put out the fires that were down there.
This video that we're watching is minutes after you've left the 59th Street car source, right?
Yes.
And when you leave the 59th Street car source, you're with Ryan Balch.
Yes.
And then this reporter, Richie McGinnis.
Yes.
And as far as you know, when you leave 59th Street car source, everybody in your group is still back there, right?
At the car source.
At 59th Street car
yes.
source. Everybody's still back there.
Yes.
Joanne Fiedler.
Yes.
Dustin Collette. Dominic Black. Nick Smith. Jason Lakowski. Anyone else. They're all still there, right?
At that location, yes.
So none of your group is already down at 63rd Street car source, right?
The other group that showed up after we got done taking the pictures with the, I think I said 2 or 3 vans, I believed they were still down there.
And that was 2 or 3 vans of people that came out with what have been described as melee weapons, right? Like bats and clubs and things like that. Do you recall that? First of all, do you recall that testimony?
I do.
Do you remember seeing those 2 or 3 vans come to that location?
I do.
Do you remember seeing people get out of those vans?
Yes. Like I saw, I think there were 6 people in total.
And you saw them with weapons?
I saw them with rifles. I don't think I remember melee weapons.
They were armed, correct?
Yes.
And you believed that they were going to be the ones protecting the 63rd Street car source, correct?
Yes.
So at this point in time in the evening, had anybody told you that those folks had left the 63rd Street car source? that's designated to that spot that's still down there, right?
Yes.
So again, why do you feel that you needed to run 3 blocks down there with a fire extinguisher if you thought there were already people down there protecting that property?
Because Dominic called me and asked me to go help put out the fires down there.
And in that phone call, Dominic never told you that any of the members of the 59th Street group that you were part of, he never said any of them were down there at 63rd, right?
Yes.
And he never told you that the group that was supposed to be down there, he never told you anything about them, whether they were there or not there. He never mentioned that. Fair?
It didn't come up.
And you asked the people that you got the fire extinguisher from to come with you, right?
Yes.
You were looking for Ryan Balch for backup, right?
I was looking around for him, yes.
You had already tried to go back to the 59th Street location, right?
Yes.
And all of those failed.
Yes.
So then you decide to take it upon yourself to head down to 63rd Street to put out fires. Fair?
I wouldn't say that. I would say I went to go put out the fires that I was there to do. When I say protect the property, I mean by like put out fires. So I went to go put out the fires. I just believed there were people there.
And you brought your AR-15 along?
Yes.
Why?
Because it was with me already.
Yeah, but you'd taken it off earlier when you were treating someone. You gave it to Joanne Fiedler, right?
Yes.
So you know how to take it off, don't you?
Yes.
And you can make a choice on your own whether or not to go armed with it or whether to give it to the person who is the lawful owner of it on that date, Dominic Black. Correct?
I didn't take my rifle off there because there was nobody I could hand it to. And when I took it off to hand it to Joanne Fiedler, I was in a safe spot in that corner of the building where there were people protecting me at that time right there. When I went to go to the car source number 3 to put out the fires, there was nobody I could hand my rifle to that could protect me while I'm providing first aid to somebody.
But you still knew you had it.
My rifle, yes.
You still knew you had it strapped around your body.
Yes.
And you made a conscious decision to bring it along, right?
Yes.
Why?
That's the answer.
He gave an answer about how he already had it, and we go through on that. So,
Did you hear the question?
I did, but I don't really understand what...
well, was it simply that, well, I've already got it strapped on, so I might as well bring it along? Is that what you're telling us? You decided to bring along the AR-15 because, well, I've already got it? Is that your answer?
I don't think I was thinking like, hey, I'm going to take my rifle off. I wouldn't have because there was people around that could have stolen my gun, and I didn't. I didn't take my rifle off because I was going there alone. I was going to be running there alone, and I didn't take it off because no one else was there to protect me as I was going there, so that's why I brought it.
For protection?
Yes.
You brought it along down there because you felt like you would need to protect yourself against someone else harming you, correct?
If that would have happened, I would have protected myself, but I didn't think I was going to be attacked and ambushed.
But you just said you had it for protection. What were you expecting you would need protection from?
I thought we had covered much of this before.
I'm specifically focusing in on the time period where he is heading down to the 63rd Street car source. I have not asked him about this yet, Your Honor.
Well, go ahead, but you need to pick up the pace somewhat.
When you decided to bring your AR-15 loaded with 30 rounds down to the 63rd Street car source location, what did you think you needed protection against?
I didn't really think I was going to have to protect myself.
You told us just now you brought it along for protection.
I did, but I didn't think I was going to need to protect myself.
You brought it along for protection, but you didn't think you needed protection?
That's not what he said. Objection.
I'm trying to clarify the two different answers that I think he just gave, Your Honor.
Well, go ahead. Can you?
Do you understand the question?
Not really.
I asked you why you brought the gun. You said you needed it for protection. I said, protection against what? You said you didn't think you needed protection. I'm confused. Can you help me understand why you're telling us you needed a gun for protection, but you didn't think you needed protection?
I brought the gun for my protection, but what I was saying is I didn't think I would have to use the gun and end up defending myself.
So you, in this video, are running.
Yes.
You run across the screen. Yes?
Yes.
And then I think you testified on direct that as you made it down the block, I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but you stopped running and you walked for a little while. Is that right?
I jogged and walked occasionally.
Carrying the fire extinguisher and your gun.
Yes.
And you're alone at that point with no backup, right?
Yes.
And you testified that when you got down to the 63rd Street car source, you indicated that you came upon that vehicle we've been calling the Duramax. You know what vehicle I'm talking about?
I do.
And you indicated that when you got there, you walked around that vehicle and you saw a person that you now know to be Joshua Zeminski. Is that right?
I walked up to the Duramax. Yes.
You didn't know Joshua Zeminski's name at that point, correct?
No.
You hadn't taken any notice of him at all up until that moment, all night long. Fair?
Fair.
This is the first time that you see that this is a person that comes to your attention. Fair?
Yes.
And you said he had a gun in his hand.
Yes.
And you put the fire extinguisher down on the ground.
I dropped the fire extinguisher.
And then you hear or see Mr. Rosenbaum coming from behind you.
When I get to the Duramax, I step forward, and then Mr. Zeminski turns towards me, and he steps towards me. I drop the fire extinguisher, step back, and that's when I see. I go to run back towards 59th Street.
And Mr. Rosenbaum is coming.
And then that's when I notice Mr. Rosenbaum running at me, leaving me with no other, right? Mr. Zeminski in front of me with the gun, Mrs. Zeminski right there, a couple feet away, and then some other people there.
And then the chase happens. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Have you told us everything that you did when that situation just happened at the Duramax?
Yes.
Can we play the iPad, please? The iPad with the drone video. This is exhibit number 73. I don't know what are you guys going to do? Mr. Rittenhouse, this is a video that has been admitted into evidence as exhibit number 73. This is a video taken by a drone that was hovering south of 63rd at the time that you shot Mr. Rosenbaum. We're going to play the beginning of this video on the iPad, and I'm going to have Detective Howard use the pinch and zoom feature on the iPad to zoom in on the area.
Your Honor, I'm going to heard outside the presence of the jury.
What do you think? Perfect time for a break, don't you think? Let's take a break. Please don't talk about the case during the break. Read, watch, or listen to any account of the trial. What's up?
Your Honor.
What, excuse me, what? I think they went upstairs, though. Go ahead.
Your Honor, I don't know what the state's going to do next, but I suspect that it's something along the lines of they're going to use the iPad, and Mr. Binger was talking about pinching the screen. iPads, which are made by Apple, have artificial intelligence in them that allow things to be viewed through 3 dimensions and logarithms. Logarithms, I don't understand at all either. And it uses artificial intelligence or their logarithms to create what they believe is happening. So this isn't actually enhanced video. This is Apple's iPad programming creating what it thinks is there, not what necessarily is there. And I don't know what's going to happen, but we had this video enhanced. We have testimony regarding it, and this is one of the topics that came up. I asked my expert. I said, do you know of anything that does something like that? Because that was when Detective Antaramian testified about pinching his telephone. And that's what I was told. And that's what I think this is going. And I don't think that it's appropriate. It's wrong.
Mr. Binger?
Your Honor, I think everybody in this room has a smartphone, whether it's an Apple iPhone or some other device. And I think we've all taken a photograph or a video at one point or another and used the pinch to zoom in feature. This is a common part of everyone's everyday life. In the olden days, you had a photograph and a magnifying glass, right? That doesn't change the photograph. When you use a magnifying glass to look at words on a paper or a photograph, the magnifying glass doesn't change the image. It doesn't change the pixels on the paper. It doesn't change the words in the book. All it does is make them easier to see. The pinch and zoom feature on the iPad or the iPhone or an Android phone, whatever device everyone in this room has, does that exact same thing. Now, if counsel has an expert who will say that this is unreliable or distorting the image or something along those lines, even though this is something everybody in this room has done with countless videos and photos throughout the last 10 years of our lives here, this is a factor. This is a feature of everyday life in America now with smartphones. If they want to have an expert come in and say it's unreliable and you can't believe what's on that screen, they can do that. We're still in their case. And then the jury can make a decision as to whether or not pinching and zooming on an iPad or an iPhone is tampering with the video or altering the image or unreliable or shouldn't be given any weight. So if they want to make a jury question out of this, they are free to do so. We're still in their case in chief. But I don't, frankly, understand or agree with anything counsel just said. I've used my phone. I think probably you have too. I think this is something within everyone's common knowledge to pinch and zoom on a screen. And that's what's going on here. It does not change the image in any way. It just makes it like a magnifying glass.
Well, I don't know. when I put the magnifying glass up, then it's enlarging the image. It is not altering the image. What he's saying, and I think, and I know less than anyone in the room here, I'm sure, about all this stuff, but I'm hearing him to say that they're actually artificially inserting pixels into there, which is altering the object which is being portrayed. And so, you know what, I myself, when confronted with these changes in technology, what I usually do is to admit the evidence, but make sure that the finder of fact is aware of the fact that it is not the original image and the method by which it's been enhanced. You're suggesting that I should make the defense bring in an expert for it. My thought would be that actually you're the one who's offering the exhibit, so you should be in a position to offer evidence as to the fact that it is not distorting the object which is depicted.
I would submit, Your Honor, that I think it's common sense to everyone in this room that that's not what's going on here. And what counsel is saying about Apple software and logarithms and things like that is not something that people in this room are familiar with.
I thought I heard the expert say on the stand, and believe me, again, this is not something I'm familiar with, but I thought I heard the expert say that you brought down in from the crime lab that in fact that there were alterations made by adding pixels. That's an alteration of the image. So I don't have any problem with it being received, but you're going to have someone testify that it's a reliable, I don't want to say mirror image, but because obviously if you insert more items into an area of space, it's going to distort what's depicted.
I think, Your Honor, when the pinch and zoom maneuver is used on a screen, it actually, it takes the high resolution that we see here and it brings it into the point where the pixels are actually spread out more.
You know what? I'm not going to accept as accurate what Richards is saying, and I'm not going to accept what you're telling me. I said if you can offer somebody who's knowledgeable in these areas, the document or I think you should be allowed to use the image. But this is high risk to me. If you insert more data into an area of space, well, you're wagging your head no. Tell me where I'm wrong.
There's no proof in this record that we're doing that, Your Honor.
I didn't say there was proof of it. I said you have the burden of proof. You're the proponent of the exhibit, and you need to tell me that it's reliable.
The exhibit's already in evidence, Your Honor.
That I know.
The enhanced exhibit is not in evidence.
This is not enhancing.
Well, then why show it? I mean, the reason you want to show it is so because it enhances the image, right? No, one at a time.
I'll say what Mr. Krause was just saying. The defense has taken videos and photos and cropped them, zoomed in on them, on many exhibits in this trial. And this is, again, like I said, the magnifying glass is not changing the image. What the expert testified to about his software program was that he uses, I think he called it AMFAR5 or something like that. It was a software program he was using to create the additional images or the exhibits that were introduced with regard to this drone video. And he talked about what that software program does. He was not talking about the common, ordinary, everyday pinch and zoom feature on the Apple. They're two different things, Your Honor, and I want to be precise about this because I don't think it's fair to equate the technical video editing software used by the crime lab with pinching and zooming on an iPhone. They're different software programs, different procedures, and I don't think it's fair to extrapolate this. Every one of those jurors is familiar with this process. This is a fundamental part of our lives nowadays. It's much like 100 years ago people used magnifying glasses. This is no different than that. And I think this is common knowledge, and I don't think I need any sort of expertise on this issue. If the defense wants to quibble with it, they have an expert who can offer testimony. But the exhibit's already in evidence. It would be no different than me putting off a photograph of it and then holding up an enlargement. I mean, we had a guy come in yesterday with Walgreens prints. mean, this is what is done with photographs all the time. There's enlargements done in the lab. It doesn't change the pixels.
No. You know, I don't want to hear about what happened earlier in the trial that came in without objection. If you didn't object, then I didn't address it. Now, I'm not going to police this case, so everybody, anytime somebody wants to put some evidence in, I'm going to say, well, wait a minute, what about that? What about that? I have to have an objection. I get an objection, and then I rule on it. There has been no objection during this trial when either side has exploded an image or anything like that. If you'd have brought in an objection, if he'd have brought in an objection, I would have ruled on it. But to say now, well, this has already been done during the trial. I've got an objection in front of me now. He's suggesting that the amplifying the image is altering what is portrayed, the image which is portrayed, and you're giving me as a defense, it's no different from using a magnifying glass. I don't believe that, because if I take, the image is the same, and all it is doing is improving my poor old vision. Here you've got someone, to correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe the expert testified that he had inserted, or either him or the device inserted additional pixels into the image. That
different program, Your Honor.
Well, I don't know what kind of a program. I don't care what kind of a program it is. The question is the image in its virginal state?
I care about what program it is, Your Honor, because these are technical issues. Mr. Richards has just made representations with no basis whatsoever.
Can you slow down?
Absolutely.
Say it over again.
Mr. Richards has just made technical representations with no basis in this record whatsoever. He is questioning a common part of life that we use, everyone uses, every single day. The expert who testified was talking about a different software program, and it does make a difference.
I don't know.
Well, then if it's going to be an issue, let's
you're
make
the
it
proponent. I said before, I'm not going to talk about it further. You're the proponent, and you need to assure me before I let the jury speculate on it, that it is a reliable method that does not distort what is depicted.
So
okay, so we're going to take a break.
I understood you correctly. We can play it now, and then we'll tie it up later.
I don't think that's what I said.
That's what I thought you said, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I did. If I said that, shame on me. I said that we're going to take a break right now. And I said, before I'm going to allow this to be amplified in the way that you want, it is going to have to be demonstrated to me that it's a reliable way to do it.
Then we would request an adjournment to do that now.
Well, we're not going to adjourn the case now to do that.
Well, before I am done with my cross-examination of this witness, I would like to use this video, and I will need some time to make arrangements for what you're asking. So I would ask that before I would like time to do that before I'm done cross-examining this witness, because this is an important exhibit that I intend to use with this witness.
Well, it depends. Why don't you get on it right away, and maybe you can get somebody to testify on this within minutes. I don't know. So we'll take a break.
What operating system are they using on the iPad?
We can answer that question.
Do you know?
Not off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Well,
iPad market.
Okay. Let's aim for 3:20 on that clock, which is. Right. Yeah. Let's aim for 3:20.